Jason Ray breaking down Oklahoma football for us, and we are looking at the offense this week. Of course, the Sooners go to fall camp after completing SEC Media Day last week, and its fall camp starting on July 31st. You touched on the offensive line, which is interesting from the standpoint that nobody's back, but they're not completely inexperienced because they bring in all these transfers that total 114 starts. And of course, much like the quarterback position, even though this is the question mark on the team, it's also a place where Oklahoma's been extremely strong in the past with the Joe Moore Award here in the last 5 years. And if there's a pillar there, it's of course Bill Bedenbaugh running the show.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think the constant of having Bill Bedenbaugh there helps, and we talked about that this last week as well. They felt like maybe the the mesh between Bedenbaugh and Luttrell will be a little bit better than Bedenbaugh and Levy, because uh, there was some word that came out that not that they were at odds or anything, but they just didn't really necessarily completely see eye to eye on game plan and execution and things like that. Whereas, I think obviously the hope is from an Oklahoma fan perspective, but just the hope just in general is, that's a little bit better this year moving forward. But yeah, you're right. Oklahoma comes in really only having one starter, and that's Jacob Sexton returning, and he was a partial start. He didn't start all year, but they bring in, you know, five different transfers on the offensive line. Fabechi Wau. I'm probably butchering that name. So he's a transfer from North Texas. He's probably the best of the group. I can't imagine that he wouldn't be one of your starters. 6'4", 340, probably will play anywhere in that 330 to 340 range. From North Texas, Branson Hickman, who is the guy that came in a little bit later in the spring. He's transferred from SMU. Multiple year starter at SMU, so he's a guy that you probably think will transition to that center role pretty quickly, pretty easily. Gabrian Hatchett, who is a transfer from Washington, played about, I think, he played in 8 or 9 games, started 4 or 5 this past year for Washington. He'll be a guy that I think Oklahoma will have in the mix from a guard perspective. Michael Tarkin, USC transfer, 6'6", 317's got the measurables. He's probably a tackle, right? I mean, I think he'll be in the mix from a right tackle perspective. And as I mentioned, Jacob Sexton. I think right there, those are probably your guys that you think are most likely going to be slotted in as starters. Troy Everett, who was the center last year, towards the in part of the year, had a pretty bad injury early on in camp. Looks like he's early on in spring camp. Looks like he's a little bit further along than most people thought. He's not probably won't be ready for camp, or maybe even the first game or two. But early on in the season, he should be able to provide some depth for Oklahoma. And then you've got a few other ones. Jake Taylor, he's one of the tackles as well. Um, he's made from everything that I understand, he's made a pretty big jump in the summer. Spencer Brown, that was the other transfer, was from Michigan State. He's a guy that played a little bit in the spring with, I think, Mark, a little bit of mixed reviews. Maybe not quite, at least maybe, and could have been just kind of getting acclimated to Oklahoma and getting acclimated to the program and everything, but maybe not quite as good, like right on as they thought. So I know that Venables talked a little bit about this, that felt like they could be 8 or 9 deep on the offensive line and really not lose a ton. But I think that's going to, with the new pieces, you can make an argument that a few of those are going to be upgrades over what Oklahoma had this past year. But I think at the same time, it'll be interesting to see how all of those new faces mix, especially when you're looking at probably 4 of the 5 starters being transfers from 4 different teams.
Talking up the Sooners here at the Voice for College Football. We appreciate you stopping by. Also, keep in mind that we've got SEC channels all over the place, including, Texas. and all sorts of SEC channels. And please subscribe to our SEC channel. So we got the particular team channels, but we also have the SEC channel, and we're shooting for 1,000 subs before we hit opening kickoff. So that link is in the description section of all the videos, including this one. And so you can grab it right there at the top of the description section.